Can you hear me okay? Awesome. Bouncing away. What were you listening to? Oh, nice. Very cool. You don't mean like Backstreet Boys larger than life, do you? Nice. Very cool. How are you? How was your week? Oh, cool. Happy birthday. Yeah, and how old are you now? Oh my God. Is that right? 25. That's crazy. I didn't realize it was that it had been that long. So I've known you since you were Jesus. So 7 years. That's crazy. Oh, well, happy birthday. Did you do anything special? No? Well, fair enough. Oh, did you hang out with anybody at least? No? Oh, okay. Fair. Well, a little bit of everything. Fair enough. Okay, well, let's talk about this. I love right up the top. I had the note here at the top that I just love that you've tried something new here. So before we get into it, I'm just most of the things in here are little things that you can just look at and fix in your own. I just want to get a sort of a sense of, is this a new? Are you going a new direction with the beginning of the previous book? Hmm. Yeah, very cool. So you, yeah, fair enough. Very cool. Yeah, I won't go into. There's just a few little spelling and typo things, not the end of the world, kind of thing like that. So what I got the vibe of, this is what happened. This is sort of the backstory to what happened leading up to the graveyard scene, essentially, and then taking it a slightly nuanced, more nuanced direction. Very cool. Oh, fair. Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah. I mean, I can see merit in both of these directions. I love what I love about what you did originally was that it seemed to be kind of a perfect blend of sort of humor and horror and gore and sort of the sci-fi fantasy element. This feels like my understanding, you're sort of going more for just straightforward, like a very much more straightforward horror approach. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I love where it ended up, but yeah, no, this is good. So I don't really have a lot of. I mean, most of the feedback is stuff that will have to do with, um, the stuff at the front end of that, and I just wanted to get a sense of, where you were going genre wise. So I mean, generally speaking, except for a few things at the beginning, I would do a standard. I don't have a lot more feedback than what's here, which is almost entirely sort of. Well, it's an entirely different thing. It would be it's sort of the difference between, say, the original Evil Dead versus the remake of Evil Dead. Have you seen either one of those? Okay, yeah, those are probably the best example of what I can think of where one was sort of the classic. Well, depends on what you like, really. Like the original is sort of considered a classic because it does what a lot of horror movies did in the 80s, which was to combine, as a very 80s thing, to combine comedy and horror. When I was Yeah, I mean that's what I grew up on. So like, I mean, movies that are explicitly that way are like Gremlins, which was really fundamentally a horror film, but it was trying to be a yeah. And it was, but it was considered, yeah, it was definitely more in that vein. Fright Night, the original Fright Night, they were scary light, but they were always kind of campy. You know, like even like look at people like Freddy Krueger versus say Michael Myers, Mike Myers. Um, Michael Myers is genuinely terrifying. Jason Voorhees is very terrifying. But by the time you get to the early to mid 80s, there was like this weird conservative movement within America that was like clamping down on horror films and saying, don't make them so gross and gory. So suddenly you had to have almost goofy bad guys. So Freddy Krueger is scary, but he's also kind of goofy, depending on which movie you're watching. Look at the original Pennywise in It, the original It versus the new It, right? So, so that's a great comparison of Evil Dead too. The original was kind of, and kind of scary, but the newer ones were very dark and very ugly in a sinister way, and I like both just, for different reasons, but they're very different flavors. So that's sort of the vibe I got out of this mostly, and I kind of liked that you were willing to explore a different way of going. It. The first one struck me as really kind of cleverly put together. I think that each of them have strengths, and it's not that they also have weaknesses. I don't see any weaknesses in either version. The first version that you had was kind of very much focused on like the very first graveyard scene you wrote. The couple that was in the graveyard were almost kind of two dimensional. They were clearly just yeah, they were just there to kind of introduce a bunch of stuff, including Julius and sort of the reality of what was happening. Then you developed, I thought, some really nuanced characters, and you created a version of both Ramona and Matthias. And I was like, okay, I'm interested in both of those guys, because it's a dog, because it was the birth, to me, it was the birth or rebirth, you call it that, of Ramona. Like this was really her true beginning for the story. You knew that there had been some antecedent, some prior stuff that happened that was basically, this is a girl who can't stand up for herself, who's easily played by men. She's naive. She's too naive for her own good, which all of that I loved. And then suddenly she was blessed slash cursed with crazy supernatural powers she'd never had before, but she was still Ramona. She was still that naive girl who, just because she got powers, like Scarlett Johansson and Lucy, just because she got the powers doesn't mean she's actually. I hated the way Lucy did this. I thought Lucy they totally missed. Yeah, because they made the mistake. In my opinion, there were many reasons, but the biggest single mistake, and every reviewer I've read sort of agrees with this line of thinking, is she's so brilliant. The first 10, 15 minutes of Lucy were the best 10 minutes, where she's like nervous about going up into the building. No, like she immediately, like the moment those drugs released into her body, she stopped being human at all. Like she had no fear. Plus she was unstoppable. You never worried that she could ever be overcome. Yeah, yeah, of course. Bruce Almighty, right? Like, same thing with like two movies that came out really close to each other were Lucy and Bradley Cooper in Limitless. And I thought Limitless was smarter in the way it handled it because he suddenly had this incredible intelligence, but he was still kind of the old loser, right? So he had to kind of his emotional development had to catch up with his sudden intellectual ability. That's the most exciting thing to me about your story by lapse is Ramona. Ramona is Julius is interesting to me, but what you did was, whether you intended to or not, you came up with a brilliant character. You didn't mean to, you didn't know you were going to do it necessarily, but because you were focused on Julius, suddenly you've created this female who can't fight her way out of a paper bag prior to being attacked by Matthias in the graveyard. So the story really, to me, was a story about the activation of Ramona and the BPA stuff. You did what's hard for writers to do. You had a cool story idea, and you also had a cool character idea. Usually, people do one or the other. Cool character idea, but the story blows. Or they've got a cool story idea, but the characters are kind of meh, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's like Steven Spielberg spending 9 years on Lincoln before he finally released it because they knew they didn't get it right. I mean, this is what nobody wants to take that long, but the best screenwriters take as long as it takes. And not everything needs to take that long. But I agree. You gave birth to a Ramona that I didn't care about before and suddenly loved, to a version of Julius that was way more interesting. Not that he wasn't initially. The insertion of the character of Dick and everything that happened. You had a great story, but the characters needed development initially, and then suddenly you ballooned and you created these characters and they matched. There was this beautiful symmetry and everything moved forward really nicely. This can absolutely work. What you've got here, this is not an either or thing to me at all. I think that what you've got going here, you're showing a depth of Ramona's character and her world that in some ways sails even past what you did with the first version of this. So this is not an example to me, where you have one great version and a shitty version. You've got two really, really unique. I didn't think you'd go back, given that we did spend as much time on the graveyard. It's cool to me that you actually went back and sort of try to create this world. I think there's a second draft here. For example, if you were to go forward here, I think there's some description here leading up to the party, and in the party that I would say let's expand that, because there's stuff like even in the description of sort of the space. Yeah, but you've got the nuts and bolts. You've got the essence of it. So this feels much more, in some ways, a much more slow brew, mature horror thing. I'm very proud of what you've done here. I s- I'm mhm. Well, yeah. If it was me, frankly, I would get rid of Ashley. What this doesn't have that the original one did have that I liked was that movement of Ramona and Matthias into the graveyard, where you clearly set up the situation where he had kind of charmed her into here and she didn't sense the danger yet. That was super interesting to me here, but it's not that this isn't interesting. It just depends on sort of what story you're wanting to tell. So this is much more terrifying, and it's a lot longer. So, for example, what you have here on page the horror, there's sort of the scary begins in page 2 or 3, and it goes on until page 8. It's a fairly long time to sort of run this scene, and it sort of at this point, for example, here you get to here, we're already at page. Let me see where we go exactly. Yeah, so bottom of page 3. Okay, so here to me is where the real action begins in a certain sense. This is where the horror aspect of it begins. Ashley was on the ground, blood splattered around her. That happens at the bottom of page 3. Then we got page 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's a lot, actually. Five straight pages of her sort of running through the situation, screaming "help, help," while she's being attacked. It's a bit long, and so if it was, that doesn't mean it's wrong. Here's what I would do. So long story short, probably what does this have that the original version or the most recent version didn't have? It has how they met and sort of the party preceding this event. I don't know that you need that. It worked just fine for me with them entering the graveyard and us assuming that. But there's something really juicy too about doing this, like showing her meeting him. The whole magic of what worked before was that Ramona was completely clueless regarding the danger that Matthias posed. And the longer you can drag that out, where it's sort of like, I would do it in stages. Here are the 4 stages. Number 1, she's at a party, and your description of her shows that she's just kind of socially clueless. She doesn't know quite how to fit in. We like her, we sympathize with her, but it's kind of awkward. She can't seem to connect with anybody. Everybody she tries to talk to, nobody really talks to her. It's not that they hate her, it's just that they're doing other stuff. Then there's this one guy at the party that she connects with. And I would have a couple of pages of a conversation, a completely non-threatening conversation, where I think hey, maybe this guy's a good guy. Wow, look at the way he's responding to her and then slowly show me that he's up to no good, but we see it and she doesn't. And then and so we're like, oh no, girl, no, no, no. So for the first little while, I'm like, oh, cool, somebody befriended her. Oh, cool, he's talking to her now. Oh, cool, he's, unusually sensitive for a guy. Cool. He's a little too sensitive. I'm starting to question his motives. Oh shit, I'm starting to worry about him. And again, that just slowly worked me through the stages of that. And meanwhile, she's just like, yeah, this, and she's just so gosh darn grateful that somebody's paying attention to her and actually listening to her. And we're like, oh, the spider is closing in on its prey, but she doesn't see it. Oh, okay. You don't think you mean you don't feel like you'd be capable of doing it? Fair. Okay. That's fair, and I appreciate your honesty. I think that would be a cool way to go, but I think that's really that's totally fair. No, I respect that. A writer's got to know what he or she's good at. Me too. There's certain scenes I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole because I don't think I could. Part of that's an age thing, part of it's an experience thing, part of it's just an interest thing too. So in that case, um, you don't have to go quite that fancy. Then you can still do a version of it that maybe you'd be comfortable with. It doesn't have to be take pages and pages, but you could still have some version of it where he befriends her and they have kind of a conversation. Or like, oh, good, this guy seems to be a nice guy. Keep it light. Right. Hmm. I love that. I love that. I think that's hidden. I think that's the best of all of your ideas. That's the one I connect with the most. The idea that you're going to focus on her first because you're introducing us to a human character. I can connect way better with a person like Ramona than I can with Julius and the BPA. Or rather, yeah, and plus it's quite a sophisticated, quite a nuanced thing. The BPA and this whole world is up. Starting real dead simple with something that's really basic. Every person I've ever worked with every person I've worked with that had a story that this would apply to, who the first version of it was way too big. Cool, wonderful, but way too big. And they brought it down to like the most basic personal level of the readership. I don't care who your readers are. They could be steeped in fantasy, steeped in horror, whatever else like that. The connective tissue between them and every other human being is still going to be somebody like Ramona going to a party and trying to talk to anybody and not knowing where she fits. That's universal. Everybody gets that. Ooh, dark. Yes. Yes. Yeah, no, well, you kill two birds with one stone by doing that. You show how naive she is and how evil he is. And that's a great two for one. Good, great idea. I like that. Hmm. Hmm. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Hang on, I'm just looking at this right now. Yeah. Just gonna remind myself what the hang on. Go away. Why is this thing still here? That's weird. Okay. Okay, I'm just going up to your yeah, save. Okay, so we're looking for adulting sex. There we go. Yes. Yeah. Well, I love the idea of her having this day. Like, I'm really excited about the possibility of your adulting sucks chapter, which is, of course, how you did, where she's had this day. and then she goes to the party that night to cut loose, which is sort of the sequence you have already going. That's really cool. Like then I would look for ways to tie them more closely together. Like what I mean by that is however she feels about her life here, whatever she thinks she needs, and you don't want to be cliche about it, but somebody could easily, you need to get out more. You need to hang out with more people. You need to loosen up. That's how you're really going to find yourself, foreshadowing, or something like that. And then she goes out and she has this nightmarish experience where, yep, she connects with people and she really finds herself. I just mean somebody at work says it like, yeah, it could be Ashley. Ashley can still be there. I don't know that I'd ask Ashley, period. I think I was just thinking in that scene, you might not need Ashley, but because I think keeping it focused, or if she's there, quickly it transfers over to the Ramona Matthias dynamic. I love what you're experimenting with here. I think this is really cool. I'm so delighted genuinely by the idea that what you've decided to do is back up a little bit, ground your story, at least the beginning of it, in this character that is super interesting to me. I love her. I love how she grows. Oh, okay. Fair. Fair. Oh, right, right, right. I see. Yeah, I'm just going back to it as well. I mean, I personally really dig what you're doing here. I love the two beat thing, and you could do it all in one chapter. You could easily do like if it was me, I would. Where the first chapter is her shitty day at work and whatever, and but I think that sequence, whether it's its own chapter or the first half of chapter, that sequence, my strong suggestion would be needs to end with some dialogue, either from her or from a friend, indicating that she really needs to get out and like she doesn't and you don't have to use these words, but things like she doesn't really know who she is, she doesn't know what she's doing with her future, she just turned 25 or whatever and she still hasn't figured out what she wants with her life, she's single, she's this, she's that, all of those things. And somebody says, well, when was the last time you went out? I don't have any time to go out, I'm too busy. Look, you deserve a night out because I fucking love it. This is horror does this all the time and it does this really good. Where it's like, like American Werewolf in London, one of my favorite horror movies ever, is two guys who decided, let's go cross country hiking across England. What could go wrong? Right. Then they get attacked by a werewolf and one of them's life is totally ruined and the other one's eaten. Right. So I love the idea that she would go to this party hoping it would do something for her. Could be a small, big. It's not going to change your life, but maybe you need to get out and meet somebody. You need to get out and find yourself. You need to cut loose and just relax. Any one of those works, or all three. And it's one of the it's that thing where Ramona could look back easily, a year from now and go, if only I hadn't gone to that party, right? And she'd probably have mixed feelings, right? Because she probably looks back at that party like a year later. She probably looks back at that party as something she has very mixed feelings about. If I had only just not gone to that party, if I hadn't taken the blue pill, I'd be fine, right? Um, but she also probably thinks, yeah, but I wouldn't have these powers. Yeah, but I wouldn't be doing something important. No doubt, Ramona, at the end of the day, after all she's been through, I would guess probably doesn't think, oh, I wish I could go back and not go out that night. Obviously, her life has radically changed and it's come with some heartache and some pain and some serious trauma. But I believe that Ramona, a year down the road, working with Julius with her powers and doing what she's doing with the BPA, probably feels more alive than she's ever felt in her life. So it's a mixed blessing. It's like Blade, becoming Blade, becoming a vampire killer. Um, so I'm digging this. I'm digging this. And I would love to see, don't do it, of course, ever, just because I say so. But I think the sequence you have here is nearly perfect. Shitty day at work, feeling like her life is going nowhere. That's classic Act One stuff. And somebody suggests she do something to change her life. She goes to it naively. And good Lord, this thing, Matthias is arguably the best thing that ever happened to her in a totally traumatizing way in the big picture. Because if she hadn't gone to that party and he hadn't done this to her, she wouldn't become who she becomes, which I'm guessing she's ultimately more satisfied with, even if happy isn't quite the word. So I would go full steam ahead. I totally get why it's frustrating. Like, fuck, we spent so long on this part of the story. Who cares? The best writers I've ever heard from never, years later, they never complained about how long it took because, fair. Yeah. I think it's because you're evolving as a writer. Ernest Hemingway was getting ready to totally throw writing away because he was fucking tired of it. And somebody said, write one more book. He goes, what am I going to write about a guy who goes fishing? And they go, well, yeah, if that's what you feel like writing. He says, fine, I'll write this last book and I'll be done. And he wrote the Old Man and the Sea, only about that thick. He won the Pulitzer Prize, changed his life, and as far as he was concerned, he was done with writing. Now he killed himself 2 years later, but that's a different story, right? um, but it is an advantage that I have simply having seen your writing for so many years leading up to 25. And, I get the up and the down, especially when you're trying to attach yourself to a Royal Road thing where you're trying to distribute stuff. I don't know anybody that I know that's done that. I think you take the pressure off yourself and you walk in this direction. Your chapter two and your chapter three, the previous chapter and this one, especially. I'm on the fence with the prologue, to be honest, but this chapter and the one immediately before it, brilliant, man. I love it. Yeah, that's fair. I'm just gonna go back to it just for a second. Well, I'll tell you where it fits. If it was me, if I was working with a director and says, really want to keep that prologue, I said, okay, well, here's what you do with the prologue. Make it the chapter after she gets attacked. Because it makes you like you could make a case for both. It's the prologue or it comes later because the idea, starting on the ground, really, really basic. That's like the Matrix. Well, how are we introduced to Neo? We're introduced to him in his bedroom. The guy's a peg. He goes to work. He hates his job. He hasn't seen the Matrix yet. Imagine if they did like a preview. They showed us the Matrix first, and then they went back and showed like be like, oh, that no, don't start there. It's like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. Don't show me Oz first. Show me her life. I would. You mean like I would shelf it but highlight elements you like about it because there is some cool stuff happening in the prologue. That sort of where her head goes. It feels like a nightmare she would have while she was recovering from what Matthias did to her. That would be cool. Fair. That's fair. I think so. Totally, yeah. I hear what you're saying. What I'm suggesting isn't necessarily that you keep the details of what happens in the prologue. Yeah, I would definitely back you up in ditching it from the beginning. And I would say that the only thing I'm not pushing for anything at all. What I do like is whatever it looks like, that after her attack by Matthias, now everything that goes down and Julius comes in, I would love to sort of get in her head as she's dealing with what movie was I just watching the other day where they showed somebody who had been turned into something else. Oh, and the Matrix is a great example. Like, I mean, as soon as he's pulled out of the Matrix, before we get to any kung fu and learning about the Matrix, there's like 4 or 5 scenes showing him just throwing up and recovering from what he went through, and they got all the things in his back, and you see these blurry images of the people coming up and go, "Is he going to make it? I don't know. Is he going to make it?" Those sort of nightmarish dream things, especially if she's just been infused. If you do a good job in the first 2 chapters, which you're doing, if you do a really good job of showing me who she is, we really, really need to get a clear picture that this is a girl who's we like her, but whoa, she's going nowhere fast, and it's partly her fault. I love the elements of when you see her in the beginning. She's being a bit of a dick to her boss. Whether the naive Ramona that shows up later would talk like that to her boss is a different question. But when we see sort of somebody whose life really is stalled, and then this thing happens to her, this horrible, terrible, awful, wonderful, empowering thing. Like that's what I love about what happens to the graveyard. Yeah, yeah, but it hurts, and that's what I love about vampire lore generally is the whole ethos of vampires is to give you what the Bible promises to give you. The Bible says you can have eternal life if you believe in Jesus. Vampires say I can give you eternal life too, but I'm going to have to hurt you and bleed you dry, or whatever the case may be, and then you'll get this power that you'll half the time you'll be grateful that you have it, and the other half of the time you wish that you could find anybody who could kill you, but they can't because you're a vampire. It's a cursed life. It's not like Wolverine, only slightly worse, right? And I love that. Ramona is a character you could run with. Ramona, you could run with Ramona with or without the BPA. I'm not discouraging that at all, but I mean, her character is so interesting. Everybody can relate to that character who gets turned, and then, I mean, Interview of the Vampire, Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise is not a fantastic movie, but the book is great. And that whole idea of vampires wishing for death that they can't get because now they're basically, I mean, they can die, but it takes, a lot more than killing a person. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you never ditch the BPA, because I think the thing that's magical about what you have is, like I said 10 minutes ago, you have what I wish every writer could find, and I can't give it to them. They have to find it. A wicked plot and a really cool cast. It's usually one or the other. Rarely is it both. And you kind of stumbled upon bits of it. You always had a great your gift, in my opinion, has always been you create these fantastic worlds, really cool plot happening through. The BP is a winner. It always has been a winner with me. I think it's fantastic. And character was your thing that you need, in my opinion, that you needed to work. And now you're giving me Julius, you're giving me Ramona. I don't know which one I like better. It's hard to tell sometimes. But what is it they have in common? They are both blessed slash cursed with some pretty cool powers, and they live a long, long time. And what are the pros and the cons of that? And you've always done a great job of saying, yeah, being a superhero in a certain set, I know they're not superheroes, but having super abilities has its ups and its downs. And you've always been comfortable showing both. I would say go into it even more. Like now that you're digging into Ramona like this with 2 chapters setting her up, tell us what she wants when she's at work. Make it really clear. I just want my life to mean something. I want to, I like everybody. Yeah. And more specifically, that almost all psychologists say that is a subconscious egoic striving for immortality. What I really want is to not be forgotten. Even though 3 generations from now nobody will remember who I am, we want we want to leave something behind. We want to leave a ripple, right? So she imagine if she Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So imagine if she says to Ashley or Karen or whoever else is at work, I just want to feel like my life meant something. I mean, I don't want people like say exactly what I just said. They say that within 3 generations, everybody forgets. I don't want to be forgotten. I want people to remember me forever. Careful what you wish for, because that's exactly what she gets, and that's so cool. And then you and then and you're taking that totally relatable. Everybody on the planet will relate to it and like her because she's Ramona. You're putting that in the context of this cosmic battle of a kind between the supernatural and what's happening here on Earth. And I know you are anyway, but always be prepared for your story to take lateral shifts. The original version, like we've talked about before, the original version of Star Wars was nothing like that. They blew up the Death Star at the beginning. Han Solo was a green monster. There were no Sith. Darth Vader didn't have a helmet. There were no Jedi. There was none of that in the original. All of Lucas's best ideas for Star Wars came after the original script he wrote was rejected like 10 times. And then they said, you got to flip some of this stuff around. And he went, fuck, okay, fine. And then he did and gave us Star Wars, right? Um, so yeah. So anyway, more Ramona. And I would start planning it that way where you're going to introduce us now to a Ramona who has very specific goals and she feels frustrated that she's not achieving them. Her life is going nowhere fast. Someone suggests she goes to a party. That's what she really needs. She goes to the party completely changes her life. And then the story really begins. What do you do, Bruce Almighty? You complaining that God's unfair, and God says, okay, I'm going to give you all my powers for a week. What are you going to do with it, Mr. I would do better? Does he go out and solve world hunger? Does he go out and no, he blows women's skirts up, he parts tomato soup, he gets, he cheats. Like the guy does what every human being would do at first. Like Groundhog Day. Same thing. What would you do if you suddenly had the power to relive the same day over and over again? Yes, like and Bill Murray takes like two-thirds of that movie before he realizes that there was an old man who dies that day, totally alone. And he realizes he's blown past this old man in his own selfish pursuits for two-thirds of the movie. And then a third of the way through, with a third left, he realizes I can't escape this day. I'm fucked. Then finally he pays attention to the old man and he spends the whole rest of the movie trying to take care of that man and make that man's last day as good as it can be. And only when he comes to that point does he break the curse. So there's something in there. There's something in there. Julius and Ramona have a lot more in common than either we or they realize. And I'm super interested in that relationship. That's not Buffy the Vampire. So now you have a female villain or vampire who isn't merely Buffy the Vampire Slayer. There's a new movie with what's his face that plays Paul Atreides in Dune. Timothée Chalamet, whatever his name is. Um, let's see. I I think I'm gonna bear with me here because this new movie that he just came out in, Bones and All. Um, there's something in there, or uh, Only Lovers Left Alive, where it's like Tom Hiddleston and Tilda Swinton play vampires who are living together and in love, and they it's almost like a hippie vampire film. Super cool. Those are the vampire films I love. Let Me In. That's a different take on vampires. Any of those movies that don't just do the Twilight thing again or the Dracula thing again, but they show real human struggles in the context of vampires, I really, really dig. Um, okay, cool. I like where you're going. I think I can sort of get a bit of a gist. Yeah, that's good that you've got a guy. Who's the writer? Yeah. No problem. What's it? Sorry, what's the book called? Game. Oh, the game at Carousel. Oh, here it is. Lost Rambler. Okay. I'm just gonna put this in your folder. It's cool. I've got a folder for you here. Let me see so I don't forget to look at this. Boom, boom, boom. Student work, Hayden. There we go. Okay, I'll give that a peek. I love that you've got the fact that you've got a writer that you're looking at that works for you, and you're sort of giving special attention to his format. So I would go for this. Hmm. You see, if you had already written, let's pretend that you had already written the BPA, the way it existed up until this new, version. You've already written Locust, it's already done, and then like your fan base said, God, I'd love to know more about Ramona. I'd love to get her backstory. And you simply gave her backstory without leading up to the moment she met Julius. Um, yeah. Hmm. Yeah, well, and you're sort of getting, that's what I love is that you're sort of giving us a taste of that here. So for next week, send me whatever you want, of course. But could you send me that list that you just sent me in the chat in an email just so I can see it, and then whatever you want to send next week. But I do really really like the vibe of digging into Ramona's. I've always wanted more Ramona. I've always really liked Ramona, and I always knew you were capable of kind of getting more into who she was. And this chapter you gave me today was, I thought, really a really good step in that direction. The chapter you gave me last week with her at work and stuff like that, also, the two of these together feel like part one, part two, the morning, the evening. And it's all a setup to that fateful night. Yeah, and how cool is that given that Julius was the sharp end of the sword initially? I'm working with another fantasy writer who did that too, that started with X, and then all the feedback. No, he is the Tommy Lee Jones to her Will Smith, is how it feels. I feel like she's only Will Smith didn't even grow a ton either, but I mean, yeah, I feel like Julius has a story, but his story, like you say, he's kind of already in concrete. If he's going to change at all, he's going to change as a result of reluctantly having to bring Ramona into his life. And probably a year from now, if I asked Julius, I said, tell me how you feel about Ramona. Ramona, she's the best thing that ever happened to me. But at the time, I couldn't get rid of her fast enough. God, she was annoying. But I realize now that I needed somebody in Ramona to make me realize that. Yes. Yes, and some hope and some joy and stuff. He needed her badly. Arguably, he needed her more than she needed him. But she did need an Obi-Wan Kenobi as well, right? To help her figure out what the hell was going on with her. So they very much like A Star is Born, Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper. Like they really, really needed each other. So anyway, have some fun with that, and I'll send you your notes immediately. Yeah, this is cool. I'm excited about the direction you're moving in here. Uh, Vampires. Where are we? There we go. Oh, and thank you for the link. I just saw the link. Very cool. What does your next week look like? What do you want to do next week? Still works good? Perfect. All right. We'll see you then, my friend. Oh my goodness. You're sorry, what is this you're reading? Fair enough. No, that's great. You're an animal. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.